All right. So when were you overseas last?
In Panama when the coronavirus
Yeah, that's
broke
right.
out. Yep.
So not too. I was gonna say definitely more recently than I was. So
Yeah, it ended a little bit too short for me, but
it's all right. It's all right. Okay. Well, guess what, Hannah? We are technically live. So I want to get right to this. First of all, those of you watching, and those no matter where you're watching, whether it's on Facebook or on YouTube, welcome to BenThere episode 22. My guest today is Hannah Petrillo. We're going to get to her in just a second. But those of you that are watching, this is usually a show about third culture kids, those of us that have grown up outside of our passport countries, cross culture kids, third culture kids. That's usually what this is about. And today's a little bit different. And I want to make sure we're clear on that. It doesn't take away from our guest because she's amazing. But I do want to make sure that those of you that are watching understand, while she's not a TCK, she is definitely a world traveler and citizen. And that's the guest today. So while this is a show usually about TCKs, today's a little bit different. And I mentioned that a couple weeks ago. We are going to start kind of throwing some guests in that don't necessarily, wave the TCK flag, but their story is definitely a story that needs to be told. And this is a story today that needs to be told. So I just want to make that very clear. So this guest today, she and I, we were talking prior to going live. We've actually known each other, which is crazy to think, about 5 years. This is the truth. This is a true story, and she can back me up on this. We were in the San Francisco airport. I was moving to Shanghai, and she was on her way to India, and she had a layover in Shanghai. And my phone was dead, and I was so scared that I wasn't going to be able to use my phone in terms of watching videos and movies and things like that. She was sitting there just kind of minding her own business until this guy happened to walk up to her begging that he could use her phone charger. I noticed she had an iPhone, but that's actually how we met. And then it turns out she was a whole row behind me on the flight. She slept most of the time, but we still managed to have a conversation here and there. So, but we've kept in touch, and I'm glad we have. But yeah, I borrowed her phone charger prior to getting on the plane. We were actually seated actually not even a couple, Hannah. We were just a row apart. But but we've kept in touch, and her story is amazing. It's a story that I didn't really know until about a year ago. But as I mentioned, she's a world traveler. She's an emergency medical technician. She's a graduate of Quest University in BC, Canada. She's a photographer, a TED Talk speaker, a domestic violence survivor, and an advocate, and she is just amazing. She's also working on solving this whole COVID thing. So we're gonna talk about that in just a little bit too. But realistically, what does this girl not do? So I'm beyond impressed, and I am super happy to have you on, Hannah Petrillo. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ben. I'm really happy to be here.
Good stuff. Looks like my brother already chimed in, so I'm gonna post these. You can look down below, and I'm gonna post them.
Okay.
Yeah. The thing I had on earlier, just so you guys all know, you got those of you that are have watched this consistently, you know how this works. We're going to talk about her international experiences for about 45 minutes, and then we're going to switch to some deep stuff. And obviously, I doubt seriously there's any kids watching, but we are going to talk about some pretty serious stuff today. So I hope those of you that are watching respect that and understand that. And if you have any questions for Hannah, please chime in. And I'm sure, I'm going to guess anyway, that Hannah, you'll be happy to answer those, once we get there. But the first part of this, Hannah, I usually start every one of these interviews off with just the guests kind of talking about themselves. I give the very brief bio. You're so much more than what I talked about. So much more than just letting some weird stranger guy borrow your phone charger. But yeah. So you finished college about 4 years ago?
No.
You're such a no, not even. Last year?
Last year.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's take a step back before you go any further. Okay, that's all right. So you were 19 in EMT and you ended up in Africa, right?
That's right. Yes.
Okay. So let's go from there. So what have you been up to? And yeah, this is your time. You're the guest. I want you to kind of talk about this. But what have you been up to since you were 19 and all that? So I guess go from there. So
yeah. Well, I guess to give a little behind the scenes of why I was in Africa, I had always wanted. I had never been outside of North America. I'd traveled around the States and Mexico and those sorts of things. But I always had this kind of dream to go to Africa for some reason. And I took a gap year to get my EMT license, to travel and to work. And once I got my license, I had saved up enough money to go to Africa, and I worked there using my EMT license in a hospital in Kenya and for an NGO doing some medical work in Uganda. And I loved it. And shortly after that trip, within a month of getting back, I was on another international flight to Italy, and that was my first time in Europe. And that was a family trip. My father is Italian, and we still have family in Italy. So that was my first time meeting family there and being in Europe. And that was a 6-week trip. And from there, we went to Spain. And so within about 6 months, I would say, I really, like, the world kind of opened up within those 6 months in terms of international travel and my experience with it. And then it was time for me to go to school. So I packed up my bags and I went to school in Canada. The school is just amazing, and that's why I chose it. A lot of people, I'm a United States citizen, and people said, "Why do you go to school in Canada?" And it was just a really great school. The way that the program is set up, you take one class for 3.5 weeks at a time. So that's the only class you're taking. That's the only class the professor is teaching. And there's only 20 students in a class. So it's really focused learning. It's intense, but I liked it like that. And my trip to India actually was a class. So
yeah, talk about that real quick.
Yeah, and that was one of the great things about the school, is because if you're studying something, you can go to study it where whatever you're studying is about in the world. So I took a visual anthropology course with a National Geographic photographer, and we went to India. And that was an amazing experience. It's one of my favorite places I've been to. We spent a lot of time in the northern region, the Ladakh Leh region, so close to, like, really, it's like the Tibetan culture. But then I got some time to travel to more of the central and southern parts of India as well. And let's see what else since then. So I think I took 5 years to graduate.
So, hey, that's all right. It happens. Me too. Back in the day, me too. So don't worry about it.
So, let's see.
How'd you get involved with EMT stuff? Because that's one thing you and I have in common. I was for a long time as well. How'd that come about?
Well, a big part of my years in high school, I would say, was I was a part of search and rescue for my county. And that really shaped me and kind of where I am today, I would say, and the path that I took. And so being on search and rescue, we learned, that was my first introduction to medicine, first aid, emergency response. And from there, I decided as a job to do lifeguarding, to kind of do that sort of thing. And then that led me to say, hey, I think I really like this medicine, emergency stuff. So I decided to get my EMT license. And that's what I did for my gap year. And I didn't ever want to work as an EMT.
Yeah.
He's not there. But the way I see it, and I still see it now, I'm still licensed, is that it's something that allows me to, I'm part of a couple different volunteer organizations. One of them is called Mobile Medics International, and they respond to humanitarian disasters and natural disasters and such. And so having that license opens that door up for me to do that. And I'd like to get back into search and rescue. So having my EMT license for that is definitely a plus. Yeah.
I'm jealous. I wish I would have known about that program. You and I talked about that off the air, but I wish I would have known that program, but I let my license lapse when I was in Shanghai.
Yeah, you should research.
Yeah, totally. Where are you from originally then?
Well, I was born in Atlanta, Georgia. I don't know if
yeah. No, I didn't know that. Yeah, not at all. You're a Southern girl. Yeah, Southern Belle. There you go. Yeah.
But I moved to Portland, Oregon when I was
Okay.
2.5. So
And where are you right now?
I am splitting my time between Portland and
Mhm.
Everett, Washington, which is
Okay.
just north of Seattle, because that's where I'm doing work for COVID.
Okay.
So I'm going up
Okay.
there sometimes too.
So now that I know this, you're an Atlanta girl, technically. Uh, but you're from Portland, you're from Washington, you've been around the world, you spent college years in Canada. This is a question that you always ask the TCKs because it's something that we all kind of, it's one of those double-edged sworded questions. But where's home for you? I mean, you've kind of been all over the place these days. So, like, what is home in terms of home for you?
Right. Home for me, I would say right now is Portland.
Mhm.
Um, but I think in the next year or two, it's going to become a little bit more murky.
Okay.
Um, I with with COVID happening right now, there's no travel or any of that, but I really do see myself living abroad and making that
Mhm.
move soon.
Yeah.
Um,
Anywhere specific that you've got your heart set on or your eyes set on or what?
well, I love warm weather and I love warm water. Um,
Yeah.
so that narrows it down to the Southern Hemisphere area.
Yeah.
Um, and um, I want to raise a family abroad. And so I've looked at places that have good international schools and have at least enough of a structure and infrastructure for health and things like that. Um, and so I found a place, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but I think it's called Sosua in the Dominican Republic,
Okay.
or Bali. I think Bali would
Oh,
be.
Bali, no big deal. Yeah. Yeah. I was actually, my brain was going towards like, I actually know people that lived in Dominican Republic for a while. So if you ever need any contact info, hit me
Oh,
up. But
that's
yeah,
really,
but then you took the leap to Bali and now I'm just like, oh man,
yeah.
because I've been to Bali and yeah, that's paradise. So yeah,
I've never been there,
oh,
so I should probably
uh,
visit before I make that
oh,
commitment.
you'll be fine. You'll be
Yeah.
fine. Don't worry about that. Yeah, well, let's talk about. I mean, I know you. I want to get into this later, but you are obviously working with the whole COVID thing going on right now. We'll talk about that in just a bit. But talk about what you've been up to the last, I guess, right before COVID hit. You were in South America, right?
I was almost in South
Oh,
America.
almost in South. So what? What? Yeah, tell that story. Let the people watching know what was going on there.
So I was in Panama, Central America.
Mhm.
Um, I was living with a local family in Bocas del Toro, which is an island off of Panama.
Mhm.
And I was learning Spanish there at a local Spanish school. And my plans were I was going to be there for 2 months. And then my boyfriend was going to fly to Panama. I was there alone with the host family and people I met, but my boyfriend was going to then meet me in Panama.
Mhm.
And we had a whole adventure planned. We were going to sail. It was a 5-day sailing trip from Panama to Colombia. And then we were going to explore Colombia, Bolivia, Peru for a month and a half. And the day that I had to leave Panama, it was the last day they were allowing people out of the country, was I believe the same day that my boyfriend was supposed to be arriving. So that was
Mhm.
kind of a bummer.
Yeah, yeah.
But I plan to hopefully resume those plans once things have settled down more.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, but you've definitely traveled. I mean, you've got probably more stamps in your passport than I do these days. So, but let's talk about that for a second because I read your bio, obviously, and it sounds like you've only not been to two continents, Australia and Antarctica, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So, what if you can think back, because you've been traveling for a couple of years now, what countries really stand out to you? Or you have any stories or any favorites, anything that really sticks out in your head? I guess.
Right. Well, one that I always go back to when I get that question is Uganda. That was
Mhm. Oh wow, yeah.
first really experience in a traveling outside North America.
Were you by yourself when you went?
I was by myself, but I hooked up with once I was there, um,
Mhm.
I was with an NGO.
Okay.
So, but I went alone. I didn't know anybody when I was
Yeah,
going.
that's still impressive to go to Uganda by yourself. Yeah.
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 So that I spent 6 weeks there, not long enough, in Uganda, specifically, and I just fell in love with the people and the place. I was actually, have you heard of the windy impenetrable forest?
I can't say I have. Yeah,
Gorillas,
sorry.
sort of mountain gorillas, the
Yeah.
silver mountain
Yeah.
gorillas.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's their
Yeah.
home. That's
Okay.
one of their homes. So I was not in a big town or city or anything in Uganda. I was in a very, very remote village uh,
Mhm.
among the gorillas. And
Wow.
if you go gorilla trekking, like that's where one of the places you might end up. But people who go for that are there for a day or 2 days.
Mhm.
Um, and so I was living in this community for a more extended period of time, and it was a community where there, like I was such an outsider, and I didn't. It was so different from my culture. Like there's newborns who, this is what I was told, who would sometimes cry at the sight of a white person because
Really?
something about it looks like you're burned, and they know something about, like, when someone gets burned, then their skin is obviously, you know,
Wow. Yeah.
uh, and so, I was in a community who I was one of maybe 3 people who had my skin color, and some people who had never. And when we ventured out to the pygmy um, land,
Mhm.
and so it was such a good experience for me, and the people were amazing, and I got to learn a little bit of the language, and um, the mountain gorillas were top 10 experiences of my lifetime, sort of thing. So yeah, I loved it. I loved it.
That's awesome. Any bad experiences?
In Uganda,
Well, just anywhere you've traveled to,
um,
or
I
maybe bad's the wrong word. Maybe not so fun, or you maybe second guess doing it again.
um, I I mean, I had kind of some strange encounters
Yeah.
happen. Uh, I was in Kenya driving up to more central Kenya from Nairobi with
Mhm.
a driver, and we were stopped, um, and I had a marriage proposal, and if I didn't accept by the officer, and if I did not accept the
Yeah.
marriage proposal, then my driver had to empty his whole wallet and give the contents of his wallet to the officer. So
Wow.
there's things like that. Um,
Yeah.
I don't think I've run into anything like really. Oh, I did have a really terrible experience at a safari in Africa again, where
Really?
I did.
Yeah.
Um,
What happened?
so I was on a safari at the Queen Elizabeth National Park in Uganda, which is right on the border of the DRC.
Mhm.
And two experiences actually. So one was I wanted to say that I had been to the DRC. So, so there was this like murky brown river, and like right there is the DRC.
Yeah.
And we were accompanied by I don't know what they were, but fully uh, armed men. Um, and our translator had made it known that I wanted to go to the other side. Um, but it was a hippo infested river.
Mhm.
So as I made my way across, there was a scary moment with a hippo where the people with the guns basically, took the safety off and had to scare it away. So that was a little bit scary. But then the really unpleasant experience I had was being eaten alive by ants. They thought I was an anthill. I think, like, that I was the anthill.
Wait. What? I'm sorry. What?
So okay, this was at Queen Elizabeth National Park. We were spending the night at a place that was called um like on the river, like alligator on the river or something like that.
Okay.
This will tie back in. So that day on that day of the safari, we had seen a giant snake. I don't remember what it was. I mean, it was like 15 feet long, and it was in the middle of the road, and it like sprung up and jumped into like the bushes. And so later on that evening, as I was walking back to my tent with another volunteer who was on this safari with me, I had joked, well, kind of, I said, if you hear me scream, it is because there is a snake, and please come help me. 'Cause, you know, it was dark out. We were going our separate ways down to these tents that were by the river. Right. And sure enough, like probably a couple minutes later, I like have a blood curdling scream. And what had happened is, so I'm walking to my tent, and I start to feel things on my legs, and I'm just thinking it's the tall grass, and brushing them off. And as I get up to my tent, which was like a canvas tent, like a white canvas, I see it. It just all of a sudden clicked to me. My tent is black, and it just clicked that what I was feeling was what this kind of moving black stuff was on my tent. And I just screamed, dropped everything. And Andy, who was the other volunteer, came running over thinking, you know, I mean, I had just told him, if I scream, please come help me. And then the other thing that kind of put me up was that there was 2 guards who came over with a bow and arrow.
And fend off ants. Yeah.
I was just thinking to myself, like, I'm by these like alligator infested or crocodile infested waters. Like, what if I was being attacked by a croc? Like, would they shoot that bow and arrow? I was just kind of curious. Like, but they were I mean, I had a strip in front of everybody. They were everywhere. Yeah. And then that night, you know, the owner ended up coming out, and they said, well, we could move you to another place, but their pheromones are on you now, so they'll just follow you. So the best course of action is to spray your whole tent with DEET. I didn't realize how bad that was in terms of me being exposed to that. And for you to just sleep in the tent, and they won't come because there's going to be DEET. So I slept in a fumed up DEET tent with, I remember laying down like towels over like where I was walking to get to like inside the tent, because it was just like a massacre of ants. I mean, it was just, everything was covered in black. My bed was covered in black. Like, it was just, you know, thick carnage. And that was really scarring.
That makes my rough days in Shanghai seem like nothing. That's not bad. Wow. Yeah. So you were in a tent the whole time, yeah?
For that, maybe it was 2 nights that we were there. Okay. For that part of the safari.
Okay. Yeah. That's not any part of that sounds fun. So the attack of the killer ants, that's rough. But have you always had this wanderlust spirit? Like, I mean, I guess that we could maybe ask your parents or things like that. But yeah, were you always that person that always wanted to see the world, maybe get out?
As far as I can recall back to, I had from a young age, like I said, I had wanted to go to Africa. I was part of a youth group, and I had tried to get our youth group to go there and raise funds. The farthest we made it was Chicago.
Hey, wait. There's nothing wrong with Chicago.
There's nothing wrong with Chicago. And
I'm a Boise boy by heart, Boise, Idaho, but we lived in Chicago before we moved overseas, so I'm a diehard Chicago everything. So Chicago's a good place.
It is. But it wasn't Africa.
Yeah, so, no. It's a little different. Yeah, a little different.
Yeah, but I mean, as a family, we traveled to, you know, all across the United States. Okay. To Mexico, to, you know, we had been to Haiti, or no, Jamaica, sorry. So I had gotten that, and I don't know, I feel like it's in my blood. Like, my parents love to travel. Like, I don't know why, but I've always had that. Yeah.
That's awesome. No, well, obviously I get it. So yeah. I'm the last person you have to convince. So yeah, that's, travel bug. Let's talk about that right now. Do you still, obviously as COVID's going on, you know, we don't need to really get into that just yet, but do you still have that travel bug? Is it, I mean, obviously I think I know the answer to this, but are there places you still want to get to? Is there anywhere that you haven't been yet? I mean, you talked about Bali. a little while ago, but is there anywhere else that you still haven't been that you want to get to?
I want to go everywhere. I would like to. I'm serious. I would
Yeah.
like to visit every country um, by the end of my life. But some ones that are more like on the top of my head for where I want to go. Bali's one of them. Oman. I had a
Yeah.
friend who went to Oman and
I'm not trying to cut you off, but I just had some friends that were in Shanghai when I was there, and they stayed a couple more years in Shanghai, but they just moved to Oman.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and they
Yeah.
so far they literally just moved like a week ago.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, they just posted some stuff on Facebook, and let me give a little quick shout out to the Babs. They're over there right now, but yeah, so it's but yeah. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, and what I've heard from my friend who she's gone there twice now because she loved it so much is that she said you should go there before it kind of becomes more of a before it explodes. Like it's kind of still people don't say, oh, let's go to Oman. It's still one of those more untouched places.
Yeah.
It's not overrun by tourism yet, and so I'd like to go there sometime soon.
Yeah. What's the connection there? Like, what do you find? And I'm all for it. I'm just interested in why Oman.
Well, I had really never thought of Oman until she said it, but I've always wanted to go to the Middle East. I've never been to any of the Middle Eastern countries. And so that's definitely like on the top of my list. And there's, and I mean, I think I would, there's things going on in those places. And if I could get into the country, I certainly would. But you brought up Oman, and I looked at some pictures, and it looks so beautiful. And she said that the people are just so hospitable, and yeah.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. What this is kind of an interesting question, but in terms, you were 19 when you left and traveled abroad and things like that. How was your family with that? Were they cool with sending their daughter off to the unknown?
Right. They were worried, but they were excited for me. So this is kind of a fun tie-in is that my mom, when she was 16, that's when she had first left North America. She went on an exchange to South Africa during the apartheid.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Saw a lot of things there. And the family that she stayed with, so she had her host mom and her host siblings. And one of those siblings, her name's Heidi, is now my mom's age and has her own children and is still living in South Africa. And so my mom had, before I ventured to the other countries in Africa that I went to, she had me have 2 weeks acclimating to just being outside of North America. And I stayed with Heidi and her family and in South Africa. But I think that gave my parents some kind of peace of mind, knowing that there would be someone on the continent who I could be connected with. But I think they were really excited for me. I mean, of course, they were worried, and there was lots of hugs and some tears at the airport when I left. But they love traveling, and I think that they were really proud of me for going after what I wanted to do and having saved up the money to do it and doing it.
Yeah, that's awesome. No, it's an amazing story because I mean, I came back to the States when I was 17, but I can't imagine growing up in the States and then at 19 just saying, let's see what happens.
Right.
So I had that whole buildup, 20 years of buildup almost, but that's impressive to me. What has traveling taught you then? Like, you've seen so many different cultures, you've seen so many different places at such a young age. What is it that traveling has taught you?
It's shown me that everybody just wants to be loved and have companionship and have fun and laughter and just have a good life. And that it's shown me that in that sense, we're not so different from one another. We're actually very similar. We're all humans on this planet, no matter what place in the planet we are. We all crave for love and friendship and we have dreams and aspirations. but then it's also showed me that like the differences of
Mhm.
and the beauty of those differences um, across the different ways of living and different cultures. And I one of the things that kind of that I took away from my time in Africa, and I keep going back to Africa because this was my first
It's all
experience,
right. That's all right. That's all right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but especially in that village in Uganda, I was I was moved by how little um, material they had, and yet how incredibly happy and
Mhm.
joyful of a people they were, and um, their connection, and um, it made me, they go and they can walk miles to get to town, or miles to go get some water, but they're so happy and they're just
Mhm.
living their life, and it's the life they know, and there's nothing wrong with it,
Yeah.
and it's beautiful, um, and so I think it opened up my eyes to those different ways of living, and that um, I think that sometimes we think that, like, come in a first world, that we need to kind of be the savior for those who live differently than us.
Mhm.
And I completely, I mean, in terms of um, prevention um, for different diseases and things like that, and
Mhm.
malaria. And I think that it's great that we are coming together as a world um, to try to address those issues. But I saw the way that people live, um, and how we should tread carefully on not trying to make everybody have the same way of life as
Yeah.
we do here. Um,
Yeah.
and so,
Yeah. It kind of puts things into perspective,
yeah.
right? Totally puts things in. I get that totally too. As someone who's traveled the world, never been to Africa, which actually leads me to my last question on your traveling experience. How were you perceived? You blonde hair, white girl, everything like that. How were you perceived once you got to Africa?
Um,
Were you accepted? I mean, was it arms wide open? Or I've never been to Africa. I could only, kind of base this off of the Asian experience how I grew up. So,
right. Well, I think it's important to, like, Africa is a big generalization. South Africa was
mhm.
completely different than Uganda,
Yeah, that's
and
true. Yeah.
the the village I was in Uganda would be completely different from, like, Kampala, like the city.
Mhm.
But I mean, they're just such loving people. I was absolutely accepted. It was just that it was like I was always on. I felt like probably how a um, somebody who's a celebrity might feel when they walk outside
Mhm.
their door, that everybody turns their heads and just watches you,
Yeah. Yeah.
stares. Um, there's a lot of stares and a lot of just watching you if you walk. It was a lot of stares, and but I think it was because, especially in that village, there wasn't many people with my skin color or my hair color,
Mhm.
so it was just something different. Um, but it didn't hold back from me being accepted. I tried my best to learn parts of their language so that um, I could be more integrated.
Well, that's so important. You just said it, just to be integrated and be more, maybe be more accepted too. But it's just, I think that's so important to kind of, if you're going to go do it, do it. Dive deep into the culture, dive deep into the language, all that stuff. So I totally agree with that. So yeah, what do you miss? I lied. I have one more question. What do you miss about? Yeah, sorry. What do you miss about your world travels right now? Because you can't. We're all stuck kind of in this COVID world. So what do you miss the most?
The adventure,
Yeah.
just the not having the same day to day. I mean, I'm sure I could change my day here, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's different when you're traveling or when you're living just in a different place.
Yeah.
It's not your home. Yeah, I just missed that adventure and the meeting new friends and making new friendships and learning from others. I miss my host mom in Panama. It's
Yeah.
very sad leaving her. Um, but I miss the adventure mostly of it, and seeing different places.
Yeah, this Groundhog Day stuff. Every day is the same, right? That's
But
just it's especially for people like you, for people like myself that have seen the world, and there's always, I think the hardest time I'm having right now, and it's no secret, it's just I don't have plans. It's the first time in my life I don't have a set like plan to be here in 2 months or here to be, even if it's domestically here in the States, there's nothing on my schedule to like go do this or go do that. It's just every day is kind of Groundhog Day. So
right,
that wanderlust stuff we talked about earlier, that's hard for people like us, right? That are so used to seeing the world, having plans, hopping on a plane. This is the longest I think I've gone, and maybe you're the same. This is the longest I've gone not being on an airplane probably my entire life. I last plane I took was in March.
okay, wow, I mean,
Yeah,
that's definitely, I think I've gone longer, but that's a
yeah,
short time period. Yeah.
yeah. But it's just, but that wanderlust. I mean, you've got it. I mean, you didn't grow up overseas, but you've definitely spent a significant part of your life overseas and seen cultures and seen those things. So you get it, right? You get that adventure spirit. It's instilled in you, it becomes part of your DNA. So but yeah, this is a tough time for everybody. I'm not trying to belittle anybody here, but it's definitely for those of us that are so used to hopping on a plane, so used to having plans to go somewhere.
It is. It is.
It's a rough patch right now. So we're gonna talk about this later. So you and your people, please hurry up and find a cure for COVID. Okay, deal.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Listen. So we're gonna switch topics now. And this is a pretty big topic that I want to get into. And this is something that I didn't know about you. Obviously, the last couple of years, I've learned more about it. Um, you've kind of weathered some storms the last few years,
Yeah.
and you've gone through some things that nobody should ever have to go through. And I'm not by any means trying to, let's just put it this way. I'm trying to respectfully talk about this because it's something that needs to be talked about or talked about. And you're kind of the go-to person right now, being that you've lived this. But if you those of you that are watching, if you read about Hannah, she's not just a world traveler. She's not just that wanderlust spirit. She went through some pretty deep stuff a couple of years ago, and it's stuff that a lot of people go through. It's the topic of domestic violence, and it's something that we all hear about, we all maybe think about, hopefully it never happens to people we know. Well, you're looking at someone that this has happened to. And I want to truly be respectful on this, Hannah. But I appreciate you being so open and transparent about this. Let's talk about your domestic violence story, if you don't mind. We'll get into the whole TED Talk stuff and everything else in just a little bit. But if you don't mind, and take as much time as you want, but talk to the people that are watching and who will be watching. Tell us about your story.
Okay. Not sure where to start.
Yeah.
Um, but I guess I don't know where to start with this.
Maybe when did this happen? Was it a college relationship? What's because that's one thing that I think that gets kind of maybe missed is a lot of people hear domestic violence, they think married couples, they think maybe older.
Right.
It's not always the case. I mean, this started young for you. I'm assuming this was a college relationship, or at least around that time.
Yeah, it started while I was in college. The
Okay.
person who I was with was older than me. He was not at my university, but I met him when I was 21, actually, here in Portland at a gym.
Mm-hmm.
And within a month, I think we were dating, and probably within 2 months, we were soulmates. And things went really fast from there. And I was head over heels. I mean, I was on cloud nine. I thought I had found my person. I had been in love before.
Mm-hmm.
I had been in a 3-year relationship before. I had it wasn't like this was my first love, and it was the things that come up for a first love. So I really thought that this was my person. The way that he pulled me in, and the things he said, the things that he did. Yeah. So
So looking back, were there warning signs? I mean, what developed from there? Because how long were you guys together, if you don't mind me asking?
We were together almost 2 years.
Okay, was it right away you saw some stuff, or was it a year of bliss and then all of a sudden some warning signs happened? How did that go?
So I would say it was about 3 months of like just bliss
Mhm.
of love bombing, which I can talk about later.
Yeah, yeah, that's one of my questions later. So yeah, let's hold off on that just a bit. But yeah, go ahead.
Um, but the things that like first came up were probably about 3 months in, and I didn't really think much of them um, in terms of things that I noticed then. And looking back, like from day one, I can see what was going on.
Mhm.
But when I started to kind of think about things, was about 3 months in, maybe 4 months in. Um, he had, I had a trip planned with my best friend at the time for her to come to Wallowa Lake, which is a second home to me. It's where I spent my summers as a child, and I wanted to share that with her. And
Mhm.
we had talked about bringing her there for a long time, and so that was the plan. And um, he was very concerned that we were going to go there and meet guys there, or he just had these kind of weird ideas of what was going to happen there. Um,
Was he
and
he was he a lot older, or was he just a few years older? Or what?
so I was 21,
Mhm.
and was I 20? I was 21, and he was 26 or 7, I
Okay,
believe.
so a few years.
I think he was 27. He was 6 years old. Um, and yeah, he had these crazy ideas of what, well, you can't go there with her. You guys are just gonna get up to no good. And I was like, no, what are you talking about? This is a mountain town with like we're gonna be in a lake. We're gonna be like hiking trails. Like, and it was so crazy for me to hear him even think that because at the time, like he was all I saw. I mean, like you could have been like, Hannah, if there was anyone in the world you could be with, like if you could be with any like anybody, who would you
Mhm.
want to be with? And I'd be like, Israel. And that's the same.
Mhm.
Because I was just so it was like unfathomable to me that he would even think that I would want to pursue or flirt with anyone else.
Yeah.
Um, and so, I mean, that he just got things in his head, and it came down to, well, um, well, I think I should go on the trip. And so I tried to get them both to come. But my best friend was like, she kind of saw some signs. She was like, no, I don't want him to go. I want this to just be a girls' trip. And he was like, well, I don't want her to come. It's me or her. So they were both saying it's me or the other person. You choose.
Mhm.
And he had kind of been planting some seeds in my head about how Brittany, who was my best friend, wasn't a good friend for me. She was in a sorority, and um, you know, it, that culture wouldn't be good for me to be around. He wanted me to spend more time with working professionals and with established women in the workplace, and not someone who was going to school and someone who was a sorority girl. So he had kind of like planted things in my head, and like, she's not good for you. And some of it kind of stuck. Some of it I was like, no, um, and so when it came down to it's this person or this person, and they were both telling me that, and at the time I'm like, well, I mean, Israel's my future. He's my future husband. He's my future everything. I mean, I
Mhm.
thought I was going to marry him. And again, it wasn't like first love, you know,
Sure.
stuff. It was like I had been around the block and I had dated different people, and he was my person.
Mhm.
Um, so I made the really, really hard decision that I wish I never would have had to make by telling Brittany, who was my best friend, that I'm gonna lose Israel if I don't take him on this, and we can go maybe another time. And I lost her over that, which is understandable. Um, But that was kind of the first like little bit where something went off my head. Like, why would he be asking me? And I was a little bit mad at my best friend too. I said, why would she be telling me, doesn't she know that like I love him? How could she ask me to choose? So I was kind of mad at both of them for that.
Mm-hmm.
And then on that trip is the first time that I saw his more violent nature, not at me per se, but we were on a backpacking trip. We went on a 4-day backpacking trip through the Wallowa Mountains. And at one point, we got this really cool tent. It's called a tent style. You can set them up like over water. It's really cool. And so he wanted me to get a picture of him with a tent. We had set it up over a river. And he like kept asking for like more pictures. And he had always like, joked with me about like with taking pictures. And so I just kind of joked. I was like, something, I forget what I said, but it was something like just an offhanded comment like, oh, like, you're so full of yourself. But like, it was like in a very joking, I don't even think those were my words, but that was like the gist of it. But it was a joke as I'm taking his picture, like, okay, and as soon as I said that, it was like Israel monster. It was like everything switched. And I was this super bad person now. Because what I came to learn is that he's a narcissist, and that for me to make him feel less than or like it was not okay for him. And it was like a very much a personal attack, even though I was completely joking and pleaded with him. I was just joking. And so that night, he would not allow me to sleep in the tent. So I
Where'd you sleep?
Outside on a rock until in the middle of the night I crawled into the tent, but he had the sleeping bag. So I was just, it was cold. And the next morning I thought, okay, he's just gonna, he's just he's just overreacting. He's gonna calm down.
Sleep it off. Yeah. Sleep it off. Okay.
Yeah. So the next morning, he was so mad. I was like trying to talk with him and like, why are you so mad? This is, and it's hard to recall everything, but he started like throwing rocks at me, and I like ran up this hill so these giant rocks wouldn't hit me, and he was cursing at me and screaming and like calling me all these names. And I was just like, I was like, what is happening? What did I do? I didn't do anything. But then I felt like I was the person at fault here. So I was trying to plead with him. We eventually packed up our stuff separately and started, because we were in the middle of nowhere. We had to keep going to our next spot to get out eventually from these mountains. And he didn't talk to me a whole, I think we did 10 miles that day. And eventually, we had a talk, and I had to apologize profusely, and I was crying to him. And he's like, never never say something like that again. Never. I don't want you to ever question me, or make me feel that way. It's like, okay. And I thought I had really messed up, and I was like, okay, everything's gonna be fine. And he never laid a hand on me or anything. He had just, thrown things and gotten very verbally abusive and very loud and scary. So that was kind of the first thing that I was like, okay. But I thought it was just okay, I just need to not joke with him about those things. It was a sensitive point for him, and maybe he has some anger issues or overreaction issues. But that's kind of all I thought of it as. Because then things were fine after that. But I do then remember. Sorry, this is all coming back. Once we were back in town, on this same trip in Joseph, Oregon, I had jokingly, again, I probably shouldn't be having so many jokes with him, but he did something, and I jokingly flipped him off, and that was a big no-no. And he got very upset and wanted to break up with me. And so I'm crying and pleading with him, like, I'm just like, I'll do better. I'm so sorry, you know? So there was like those sorts of things happening when things first started, kind of.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the initial warning signs, I guess. But yeah, let's talk about that TED Talk for just a little bit, because I did go back and watch that. And those of you that are watching, if you look down below on the screen right now, that is the link for Hannah's TED Talk. And we'll talk about this a lot in the next probably half hour, 45 minutes. But if you really should check this out, not right now, of course, but once we're done, make sure you check out her TED Talk. It's pretty impressive. But that said, you do in the TED Talk, Hannah, you talk about love bombing.
Yeah.
I never heard of that. You know, I'm going to guess a lot of people haven't heard of that, but let's talk about what love bombing is.
Right. Okay. So love bombing is someone who comes on really strong in a relationship, showering you with lots of compliments. They don't really find any flaws with you. They often, like on my case, I had these dreams of sailing the world, and then those became his dreams, and then we're gonna sail the world together. And like before we even started dating, I'd come home and there was a vase of hand-picked flowers. He rode his bike to my house, and as he was riding his bike, he would stop and cut flowers and put them in this vase. And then he left them for me when I came home, and he wasn't there, with a little note like, you know, I picked these for you. And so it's very much over the top signs of affection, to the point where you're wondering, like, this is too good to be true, which my father actually had made a comment of at one point, like, this guy's like too good. Like, my dad said, what is he hiding? Very early on. And so that is love bombing. And that is really the first sign of, I didn't see it, I didn't know about it, but that started from day one. And that is something for people to know about, to have a light go off and say, oh, this is too much. Maybe I need to slow down a little bit and kind of assess what's going on, because that is a tactic that people, I mean, you don't fall in love with someone who is who's violent, or who is mean, or you know, any of those things. I mean, he was like this perfect person. And no wonder, like, I wanted to marry him. I mean, he did everything right.
Was he working? I mean, was he established? I mean, how did?
You know, that's probably one of the like negative points on the on the pros and cons. But he was working for an HVAC company that his dad runs, which, I mean, is that so. And he was living on his own, but he wasn't some super rich guy or anything like that.
Yeah, no worries.
But yeah, I mean, that's how I don't want to say all the time, because everyone has a different experience, and
sure.
But the majority of the time when you get caught in an abusive relationship, they're just the most charming person ever when you first meet them, and for the first few months, because that's how they get you hooked in, and that's how they get you stuck. And something I talk about in my TED Talk is it's the boiling frog analogy, and something my counselor shared with me. And she said that when you if you were to put a frog in boiling water, it would jump out. But if you put the frog into cold water and slowly turn the heat up, then it won't perceive that danger, and it will eventually be cooked to death. And so abuse works a lot in the same way, in that you're not being thrown into the abuse on day one. You're being thrown into paradise, and slowly there's little things that happen, and then things get worse, but you justify them because complex things, and that's kind of the beginnings of it.
Is that where trapping plays a part then? Because you mentioned trapping in your TED Talk as well.
Is a big trapping of people who get in those relationships. Do you want me to go over different
Yeah.
reasons why people
This is all you. Yeah. Just yeah. It's all your. Yeah.
Yeah. So so in my TED talk, I go over the early warning signs to be aware of, and one of them is love bombing. Another is that the relationship moves faster than what you feel is normal. Some relationships might move faster generally, but if you have many of these signs, you should be cautious. Another one is having rigid gender roles, like make me a sandwich, you're the woman. And it might be a joke. And that's kind of how it was and how I perceived it and how he rolled it off as things were, as the heat was being turned up, it was little things like that. And so he was very machismo and had those structured roles of what a man and what a woman is supposed to be and do. And then showing signs of possessiveness. So if, he did not want me to go to Walawa Lake with my best friend because he needed to be by my side and make sure, have his eyes on me. And he wanted me to rid my best friend from my life. And that's then another one, isolating you from friends and family. And then telling you what to do. So back to that possessiveness. He would frame it as like, I would go to the gym and I was kind of going through a hard time with eating disorder stuff. And so, he framed it as that he was looking out for me by saying I wasn't allowed to go to the gym. But then I started to go to the gym just to shoot hoops because it helped me process things, especially as things progressed with our relationship, and it helped me to just think. And I wasn't even allowed to do that.
Which is ironic because that's where you met him.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And he would frame it as, well, it's not good for you. But then eventually it became, well, you're up to no good. You're checking out other people there. But in the beginning it was that I'm looking out for you. So those sorts of possessiveness sorts of things, trying to frame it like they're actually doing what's good for you, but it's really a different agenda going on. And then speaking disrespectfully about multiple partners, former partners. So this is a big red flag. If someone cannot accept that they're part of the problem in any of their former relationships and it's all the other person's fault for multiple partners, that's never the case, right? I mean, it's relationships are a two-way street. So, and with Israel, he had a dream one night. He woke up and he said, he had a bad dream. And I said, well, what was it? And he said, you met my ex-girlfriends. And I was confused why that would be so bad. This was probably about 3 months in. This was before the trip to Walawa Lake.
Okay.
So this was another sign that I could have been aware of. And he said, well, they're just so awful. They would tell you all of these lies. And I don't know if you'd want to be with me anymore, or something along those lines. And I was like, well, what do you mean? Why would they say those things? And he's like, they're vengeful. They're bitches. They're liars. They're awful people. And I didn't really, I didn't really think a lot of it at the time. I didn't know about these things. So, it should have kind of been of a concern for me, but it wasn't at the time. And I just kind of was like, okay, I guess he doesn't want me to talk to his ex-girlfriends, whatever. I had no interest in talking to them either because of all the bad things he said about them. So, but the reason he did not want me to talk to them is because, and why it would be such a terrible thing if I did is because eventually I did reach out to them when I was towards the end of my relationship and just trying to find any hope that, I basically found them through means of investigation and mutual friends on Facebook. And I was able to find them and ask them how their relationship was and if they thought that there was any hope for him. Because I was trying I wanted to be with him, even though at this point he was very much abusing me. And then what I learned from them was the first steps of me leaving him. And it was that he had abused every single one of them.
Mentally, physically, all the above. Yeah.
so there was 4, 2 of them verbally and mentally, and then the other 2, all of the above. And then something I was informed about later on is that one of the patterns they see with repeat domestic violence offenders is that as they see new people, like in the beginning, it might not be as extreme or violent, but with each new person, it gets worse. And so the first two people were the ones that wasn't violent. It's still terrible. Mental and verbal abuse is just as bad, if not worse, in my mind than the physical. I mean, the toll it takes on you. And so yeah, that was interesting to know. And I don't remember where I was, but where I was going with.
Yeah. Take a breath. You're good. No, you were just talking about the other 4 and just kind of gradually how it progressed into to your relationship. Yeah.
Right. So that's a warning sign, is that if they speak disrespectfully about former partners and nothing's their fault, you should be thinking what's really going on. And then the last one is that I have for you all is if you know that person has a past of domestic violence, you really need to take that seriously. The person will, abusers are very charming people. That's how they can do what they do. And if you know that they have a past with this, especially if you find out in the beginning, in my experience, he went to jail and all this stuff. And he had a girlfriend when he was basically arrested. And the girlfriend was already wrapped around his fingers and said, well, no, he wouldn't hurt anybody. But she had the knowledge that, no, he's being arrested and he's being charged and sentenced for this. And at that point, there was multiple women coming forth about it, but she just could not see him doing that. And that's because she was in the love bombing beginning phases. And they will try to create a story. Well, no, this is, they will make excuses for it and make it sound like it really wasn't their fault. So if you do know that they have a past with domestic violence, you need to get out, or you need to tread very, very carefully.
Well, on that note then, and I mean this with all, due respect and super respectfully, you ended up in the hospital, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, on that note by itself, why do you think that it's so hard for domestic violence victims to leave?
There are a lot of reasons. For me, it was that I was so in love with him. I was so in love with him. He had convinced me that we were soulmates. I mean, he had all this soulmate jargon.
Do you think he was doing that with all the other girls too? Same speech, same talk? Yeah.
Everything was the same. I mean, I talked to some of them and, down to the T, everything that he did, all the things that I thought were special between us, to the things that, that he would say, oh, you have cute, what, so-and-so, or it was like, oh my gosh, he said that to you. He said that to me too. Like, I was like, oh my gosh. That was like that's where I was able to kind of, I was getting to leaving him at that point. I was like, I felt like everything that he had told me in our whole relationship had been a lie, as much as I didn't want it to be, because I had fallen for it so much. So for me, leaving, the reason why I stayed and why it was really hard to leave is because I was.
And not just you. Yeah, not just you. That's the whole thing. It's kind of a common theme, right? Of domestic victims that they have a hard time leaving, right?
Oh, definitely. And and there's a lot of reasons why. And for me, it was me being so in love and my belief that things would get better. There was a cycle to it. And so something would happen, and then he would profusely apologize, and then things would be magical for a little bit, and then something would happen. And so, it was holding on to those points where things got better, and then hoping that after my incident in the hospital, actually, I wouldn't go back to him unless I told him he needed to seek counseling for anger management and violence. And so he agreed to do that after a lot of convincing. And so I was just hoping, I was doing everything I could to I was like, I just got to stick this out. He's my soulmate. How could I give up on him? Things are going to get better. And I have to believe in him. How could I leave him now? He would say, you know, when he's apologizing, you know me best, you know me more than anybody else. Like, you can't leave me. Like you're the only person who can help me, you know? So that was for me, but for other people, financial reasons, religious beliefs, they don't have a support system, and then afraid that of the threats that they've made. Like, if you
Mhm.
leave, I'm going to kill you, or if you leave, I'm going to hurt your family. Um, and
How was your family during this? Did they know what was going on?
um, they did when I went to the hospital.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah, and
they
that's, and by the way, I mean that respectfully. It's not a knock on your family because sometimes they don't know, right? Because you never want to. You always want to protect. It's almost a protector from your end, right?
right. And
Yeah.
actually, the fact, so my family knew at some point, and
Mhm.
I didn't realize until after the fact, like how much pain it was bringing them and how difficult it was for them. But they did the right thing in my mind, and the hard
Meaning.
thing, which is staying with me
Mhm.
by my side, even when I went back to, and not giving me ultimatums. Because if they had given me an ultimatum, I mean, he was my soulmate, and like,
Mhm.
I mean, he was going to be the father to my children, and I was so wrapped around this fantasy. So if they had given me that ultimatum, I would like to think that I would not have, that I would have come to some sort of agreement. But if it really was us or him, the way that he had manipulated me, I might have left my family. And if I had done that, I don't know if I would be out of the relationship today.
Yeah.
So they did a really hard thing by seeing me through it all, and by they got me to go to a domestic violence counselor, which was very, very important for my journey and for my healing and for while I was in it. So they did what they could, but they did not say, you know, you have to leave this person, and if you don't, we're going.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about your healing then, because obviously, looking at you now, you're doing pretty damn well. I mean, I know you went through hell and back, but how did that healing initially begin? Like, where did the strength come from to finally leave?
um, so it started when I was in Hawaii with my family,
Mhm.
and
That's tough. Hawaii by itself. Yeah. Good place to find hope again. Yeah. Go
yeah,
ahead. So.
um, and I was in discussion with other past girlfriends,
Mhm.
learning and
Was
getting,
he still in the? He was still in the picture, or no?
yes,
Maybe
yes,
that. Okay.
he was.
Okay.
He was not in Hawaii. Though I was just with my family.
Yeah.
I almost did not go because he tried to convince me not to go.
Yeah. Actually, that's what I was alluding to. Is I just didn't know if he was there with you or if you were with your family only. Go ahead.
Um, so I had what set off the chain of events. I mean, obviously, me reaching out to these girlfriends and finding out things. I found out that he, while I was in the hospital, he had slept with someone, and um, because actually I ended up having chlamydia, and so I got a test um, back that I had chlamydia, and I was like, well, that's strange because I didn't have it. I just routinely get, my doctor just checks everything. Um, and I didn't have it a few months ago, but I have it now. But the only person I've been with is this one person. So how do I have it? Um, because he's the only person I've been with, and I had been with him
Mhm.
when I had the negative test. So why is it now positive? And so, anyways, I confronted him about that. He lied, and then it finally got it out of him. And but he told me a lie about that. He told me that he had went and slept with one of his ex-girlfriends, and I um, so I think that's when I first started reaching out to the girlfriends, and I called, and she was like, I don't know what you're talking about. She lives in Florida. She's like, he's lying to you. I have not seen him for this amount of time. So I
Yeah.
wouldn't have thought I was going to be like, you have chlamydia if you don't know. And, you know, and so then I was like, oh my gosh, okay, he's lying to me about this. And so I don't know what he was doing, but um, then when I was in Hawaii, so I had already, there was these things going on. I stayed with him. I was like, okay, you know, he said, well, when you were in the hospital, you know, obviously he put me in the hospital. He's like, I broke up with you. He broke up with me. He was so mad for, I think I liked a guy's Instagram photo And there was another thing that I had lied to him about someone I had slept with. Somebody messaged me on Facebook who I hadn't talked to in years. And he said, have you slept with this person before? And I said no, because I feared what he would do. Like, this person's message just came out of nowhere. And I said no. And then he like scrolled through the messages and it came to light that yes, at one point we had. And so that just set him off. And so he said, well, I broke up with you, so it's okay. So I kind of excused that. I said, all right, well, you know, you cheated on me when I was in the hospital, but I guess you don't see it as cheating, and I guess I can kind of move past that. And so back to Hawaii, I was messaging another ex-girlfriend, and she had brought up, we were just going back and forth about some things he'd done and the ways that he restricted us in our living our lives. And she said, and did he tell you he was a stripper?
What? Wow.
In the past. And I said, no. And I have no problem, you know, live your life, do what you want. Yeah. But he had been so condescending and so controlling in what I could wear and where I could go. You know, I couldn't wear like, you know, this isn't appropriate. And I could not believe that he had been a stripper before I met him. And he never told me. And the fact, all these rules he was giving me, like, but you, so
kind
that
of hypocritical. Yeah.
And so I texted him when I was in Hawaii, and you know, sending me all these love messages. And I, you know, I think I said something. She gave me his stripper name, and so I said goodbye, whatever his stripper name was. He knew that I knew. I gave him his stripper name.
Yeah.
And that was the start of it, and I just couldn't get past. I mean, that just really ticked things off for me. And then, like, I don't know, I need a break from you. I can't do this. So when I got back home from Hawaii, he was actually in visiting family in San Francisco.
Okay.
So I decided to go get my things from his house because I didn't want to see him when I was getting them, because it would make it harder to leave. And I wasn't like 100% on leaving him at that point. I just wanted a break, and I just needed space. So I went to his house to get his things. He wasn't there, my things. And there was a camera sitting there, and I just, like, I don't know why, I just picked it up and started like going through the photos on this DSLR, and I see all these photos of naked women, or of one woman who's naked on a bed, looks like in a hotel room, and the timestamps are from about a month ago, like the month prior. And I found out about the chlamydia thing was like 9 months, so it was like 9 months in the past. And then I'm seeing these pictures of this naked woman, and it was when I had asked him, I think he was acting strange, and I said, what's going on? You know, he went to San Francisco, and he was like, just weird things were happening, but he was like, you know, no, everything's fine. But it was that he had been sleeping with this other woman, and I just lost it then. I just started crying, and I could not believe that, like, I had fallen for all these things and forgiven him for so many things, and that I thought that maybe things were going to be different with me, even though they weren't for the other women. And that's when I finally cut ties. It's very hard. I could not eat for a long time. The only thing I could stomach was spinach feta wraps from Starbucks.
Yeah, they're good, by the way. Yeah.
I spent weeks in bed. I mean, I was just physically ill. I was so physically ill. I just was crushed. That
totally makes sense. I can't even imagine. But I'm assuming that's where counseling took over, because I'm a huge advocate for mental health. So how did counseling help you get, you know, in terms of your recovery? How did counseling help you?
Well, I'm trying to think if, you know, this was so I was mostly in counseling while it was very helpful. It was with a woman who had been through it herself. So, you know, I didn't have to explain why. It was, you know, it was very, very, very helpful. But when I believe there was, because I had just gotten back from school. My counselor for domestic violence is in Portland. And I had gotten back from school. And when I got back from school, we went to Hawaii, and then we came back. So I wasn't in the groove of things with her. And when I was at university, we were doing virtual sessions. But I was kind of in this transition period. So, but I did have a friend who was with me when I was at school, kind of doing my investigation with these girlfriends and finding out these really heartbreaking things. And her mom led a expressive arts therapy retreat in Sonoma County in California. And so I went to that. It was a week or so. And that was very helpful. And I mean, my road to healing is kind of a series of events. After that, it was there that I realized that I couldn't quite let go of things until I had made a report about him. I
Police report or what?
Police report. Yeah, I was made aware that with each person, typically things get worse, and so I just couldn't imagine if he had killed his next girlfriend or really really hurt her. I wouldn't. I couldn't. I wouldn't be able to sit with myself knowing I didn't do what I could have to potentially prevent it. So a week before, so this was all happening this summertime. So I got home from Hawaii, went to his house, split with him. I then went to this expressive arts therapy retreat, kind of like came to some healing and what my next steps were. I came home, and a week before I left for Canada, I went to the police station and just told them everything. And I thought a little report was going to be put away for if something happened again, that they would say, oh, he's done this before, so therefore the consequences are going to be more severe, or he's done this before, so I don't know. I just thought there was going to be something on his record. And I found out that actually he could still be charged and he could go away for 7 years in prison, which was like very hard to sit with, because I was like, oh my gosh, I was not coming here to necessarily do that, but that is I guess good. I wasn't sure how I felt about it, but I wanted to proceed and just see where things went. And so I went to school. So I'll tie in. I then went to school. The police were doing what they were doing, investigating. That I gave the names of all the girlfriends, so they were calling them up and getting hospital records. And I sent them pictures. At one point, my mom, thankfully, she wanted to take pictures of my bruised body, because she said, something about like you need to have these so that when you're ready to leave, or you can look back on this and you can know what he did. And so I had those pictures, so those were sent. And then I went to school, and the first course that I took, again, it's one course at a time at my university I went to, and it was an expressive arts therapy course. And our final project was, and so a lot of the things I was doing with that was sorting through everything that had gone on and working through my pain. And the last project was to do an expressive performance.
Was this a dance?
This was a dance and monologue. Yeah.
Okay.
Do an expressive performance on a suffering you've been through. And throughout this course, we had developed a very intimate friendship with one another. The 20 people in this course, the nature of the course, and the activities we did really brought everybody very close together. And so it was a safe space for me. And I did a monologue and a dance going through my relationship from beginning to end. And that was the start of a lot of healing for me, was sharing my story in that way. And then the feedback that came from that, and the stories I then was told by other people, and how it spoke to other people and moved other people, brought me like strength, and like, okay, what I went through, it was terrible, but I can use my voice to help others, and with their own healing, and then also with preventing the situation. And then about a month later, I was in court doing giving my victim's statement. I flew back to Portland for 2 days to do that, and that was another big healing moment,
Yeah.
was doing that.
Which, by the way, I posted that. So those of you that are watching, if you want to read that, and it kind of goes into a lot more detail, but you're so brave for doing that, Anna. Check that out. It's linked to, and I'll have that on BenThere.org as well. But yeah, that's something that those of the watching can actually look up and read as well. So that kind of gives a more deeper kind of avenue as to what you went through as well. So
Yeah, yeah.
That's
Sorry, go ahead.
no. It's all you. It's all you.
It's kind of a long process of healing. So
Yeah.
then I, after that, there was a call out for my university was seeking speakers for Vancouver and the Squamish area of BC for a TEDx event. And
I was going to ask you about that. Thank you, because I had no idea how you had just ended up a TED Talk speaker.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So their theme, if I can remember correctly, was something along the lines of like breaking convention, something like that. And so, I saw the postings for that, and I thought, well, I had just done this thing with this class. I had just given this sentencing talk. I had this was also kind of like pre the Me Too movement. I mean, it was kind of along the same lines, the same time frame, but Me Too hadn't quite come out as so explosive yet. And so, I was like, okay, like I am like kind of breaking convention, I guess, by sharing my story doing this. And so I applied, and they selected me as a speaker, and then I.
It's an amazing speech, by the way. Like I can't stress enough. If you haven't seen it yet, there's the link right below. I'll have it on afterwards as well. But yeah, it's amazing.
Thank you. And yeah, it was very nerve-wracking.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't too far from when this all went down. It wasn't like you had years in between, right?
No, it was. So it was about in October that I was like accepted as a speaker, but the speaking event wasn't until March.
Okay.
But it was about a year. About a year after.
Yeah, we're not talking years. We're talking a year, maybe, right?
Yeah.
That's impressive. And you were healing still, and you're still healing, but you're doing very, very well, and I want to applaud you for that. So, what? And I'm not trying to jump into another question here, but that said, novices like me, people like me, people that want to help. What can others do to help those that are struggling with domestic violence? Because this isn't it happens a lot more than I think people realize. Obviously, if it can happen to you, I mean, you were probably, typical, and I mean this respectfully, but I'm sure you never thought it was going to happen to you, right? It was always going to be somebody else. It was always going to be another friend of yours, maybe, that you'd be counseling them or talking to them or working through things with a friend of yours, never you, right? And I mean that respectfully, but that's kind of the the theme of this is that it's never going to happen to me. Is that fair to say? So what can others do that can help that or help with that stigma or those struggling with domestic violence?
In terms of helping someone.
Whoops, you froze just for a second. Let's see if she comes back. Can you hear? I don't know if you. There you go. Whoops. You back? Hold on 1 second. You froze for a little bit. What'd you say? There you go. You're back. I'm back. So.
Okay. So that's kind of one of the big things is to not give the person an ultimatum. If a loved one of yours is going through something like this, is to not say you need to leave them or I'm leaving your life. I know that it's very hard to watch someone you love go through something like this and go back again and again, and it doesn't make sense. But I think really one of the worst things you could do is to give them an ultimatum because they might choose the wrong one. And it would also strain your relationship with them if you do. And it's really just important to be there for that person through it all, to let them know that you, that they can talk to you. And to also, if they aren't already hooked up with resources, to find those resources for them. So For me, my parents, when I got out of the hospital, they found me a domestic violence counselor.
Mhm.
And not just any counselor. She was specialized with domestic violence, which made a difference because she had been through it and she had been out of it. So she had been on both sides. She knew what I was going through, um, and why I was going back and everything. But she also had been out of it, and she, of course, had the perspective from an outsider of seeing things that I couldn't see. And
Wow.
anybody could have told me, like, this is really bad. You need to get out of this relationship. But when it came from her, I took it more seriously because
Yeah.
one, she works with people all the time who are in these relationships. And so if she's telling me I'm worried that he's going to kill you, then I'm like, oh, okay. You're
Did
not.
you fear that?
Well, actually, her kind of at one point saying that to me
Mhm.
made me fear that more. And so and from that point on, I said to myself, I will never be around him if he's near a gun, and I will try to not be around him when he's drinking, because I didn't believe that he would kill me when he was in a more sound state of mind. But he has very like quick reactions. So if he had a gun, he was just in the heat of the moment, I would be afraid. And
Mhm.
if he was drinking, there was no limit to what he could do.
Where is he now?
Um, I don't know. I think that so he could have gone to prison for 7 years. I was given the option if I wanted to go down a grand jury path and do a whole trial and all that.
Mhm.
Um, or if he had pleaded guilty to some more minor charges. And he pled guilty to originally he was not going to plead guilty because so at that point I was going to go to court, and if we won, then he would be in prison for 7 years. But he ended up pleading guilty because one of the other girlfriends had the courage to step up and get involved and brought her, like, my detective who was working on it brought her in. And I think that his attorney said, if you don't, there's other people coming in with more evidence. If you don't plead guilty to this, things could be even worse for you. And so when I got the news that he was going to plead guilty, when I went into it all, I just wanted something on his record. And so I didn't want to go through a legal battle that could result in nothing on his record. So I said, okay. And the maximum time that he could be given with this plea deal was 3 months. And the minimum amount of time was 0 months and just probation. And so he got 3 months. And his probation was that for 5 years, after getting out, he's not allowed to drink. He's not allowed to go to any bars. He's not allowed to smoke marijuana. It's legal here in Oregon. He is not allowed to engage in a relationship with another woman without first informing his patrol, his what they're called,
Mhm.
his,
Probation officer. Yeah.
his probation officer, who would then sit down with that woman and explain his past. He's not allowed to own a gun. There's many things. So I felt very happy with that sentence. So to go back to where he is now, I don't know. He's on probation still.
I just didn't know if he was in jail or in prison. That's all.
No,
That's it.
so he's not. I have a restraining order. If he ever tries to contact me or any of his family do, then he will go back to jail. And he could be, he lived right down the street from me, so he could still be there. And thankfully, I have never run into him yet. I see his car, the truck he was driving, and it gives me kind of anxiety whenever I see it. And I'm like, that, but it never has been. So, yeah.
What a story. And wow, you are one tough cookie. You're doing well. And I want to kind of lighten the mood a little bit and just kind of, how are things now? Because obviously you're happy, you're healthy, you're in a new relationship. How are things going now? What are you up to? Because I want to talk about the COVID thing too. Like, you're saving the world, you're doing everything. So let's talk about Hannah now.
Okay.
I want to kind of bridge that gap and transfer into that section too. So what are you up to now?
So Hannah now is, I'm in a relationship with a really lovely man. His name is Jaron.
It's got to be a strong guy too, if he knows all about this, I'm assuming. Yeah,
He was at the hearing, at the sentencing. I didn't want to have a boyfriend, to be quite frank, for years after I got out, but I wasn't looking at all, but this just happened. So here we are. We're going on 3 years shortly. He's been great. And what I'm doing now is, with COVID and everything, I had to go back from Panama and here. And so my background with, well, my EMT and my travels, doing public health stuff, but also my university degree is, I have a combined degree in biology, sociology, and psychology.
No big deal. Yeah. No big deal.
So that comes, that's a really great resource for what I'm doing now, which is I'm working on the internal response for COVID. I'm not quite on the front lines, but contact tracing, I'm sure everybody's heard of that by now. I supervise a team of 7, we call them disease intervention specialists, and they are the people who will call you if you have a positive diagnosis. They might also be informing you of your positive diagnosis, and then they will interview you and find out how you're doing, where you've been, get your contacts, who you've been around when you were in your contagious period, and then call those people, give them instructions for quarantine. So that's kind of the work I'm doing now.
Saving the world. I love it. I love it. Let's talk about your other passions, because I know you're a photographer too, right? So let's talk about that. How'd you get involved with that?
Yes, I have loved photography since I was young. I mean, I don't even know what they're called, those little, like, those cameras that go like that print out a thing right when you click on it. It's like an old 90s thing. I don't know what they're called.
An old 90s.
I know, I'm saying old 90s, and you're like, what do you mean old 90s? I was like,
an old 90s thing. Yeah. I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
So from a young age, like 4 years old, I would set up my.
I believe Polaroids is, I think, the term you're going for. No?
Yes.
Okay.
It was.
Old 90s thing. Thank you. So I think it was actually 80s, but that makes it even worse. So go ahead.
And so I'd set up my stuffed animals and take pictures of, like, arrange them. So from a young age, I went for high school. I was in art school, and I specialized in dance, theater, and then photography. So I worked in a dark room, and I got like a pre-professional endorsement for that. I got a lot of training in that, and haven't been in the dark room for ages, but I love digital photography as well. And I have a lot of wonderful photos that are just sitting in my computer or on a SD card, which need to be shared. So
it's time. It's time you got those out to the world. So yeah.
I gave Ben my Instagram, 2 Instagram, which there's not many recent postings, but there will be, I promise. It's time.
Yeah, it's time.
It's gonna get me to start posting again, because I've got so many. And I do candid photography, I do portraits, and then I do landscape photography. So
yeah, those Instagram sites are actually posted. So, and again, once I move this interview over to BenThere.org, we'll make sure those get posted as well. So, but yeah, it's time to update that. Let's get moving on that. So.
And I just got in the past 2 months, I got a drone, so I'm venturing into drone photography too.
Oh, cool! Very cool. Yeah. Well, listen, we are actually down to the last 3 questions, so this is kind of cool. So I told you this goes by fast. Believe it or not, it's an hour and a half already. So I just want to be respectful of your time. But I always end these with the same 3 questions. I hope don't give too much thought to these, because they're not supposed to be. These are supposed to be kind of fun, kind of to bring it all back in. So you've done great. You can take a breath. All the serious stuff is over. We're still breathing. Both of us are still good. But let's. I mean, we just kind of talked about the photography, but is there something else? Something that people don't know about you? Is there something else that maybe people don't know?
Have you seen 7 Years in Tibet?
Yeah.
Do you know the scene with the worms, when they are taking the worms out of the ground? They're building a theater, and the monks don't want to.
I gotta be honest. I saw that movie when it came out. I'm older than you. So it's been a minute or two since I saw that. So yeah, go ahead and tell people what that is. Yeah.
So there's a scene where they're building a theater, and the Tibetan monks are freaking out because there's worms in the ground, and they don't want to kill them. And so there's a solution found where they are taking each worm out of the ground and putting them into a hole, and then relocating them to another place to have them be safe there while they build the theater on the ground that no longer has worms in the dirt. And that is that is me.
I don't know where you're going with this, but that's
that is so.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know that I have a really hard time killing anything. Like, I can't kill a mosquito. I can't. And the mosquitoes that have been killed through my I've had rare occasions when they won't leave me alone. I've had someone else do it for me, and I remember those times and places. And I've been a vegetarian since I was 4 when I watched the movie Babe. So maybe that has something to do with it. But I literally, it hurts me to even, like, if I accidentally step on a bug, it's a really bad day for me. I hate that there's suffering in the world. I know that it's part of life, but I just don't want to bring it on to anybody, even if it's anybody or anything, even if it's by accident.
I love that. That's I'm laughing because I applaud that. Yeah. Mosquitoes, I can't stand mosquitoes. So
I know.
I will be better. I will think of you every time I go to swat a mosquito now, and be a little more I don't know what's the right term. A little more peaceful, a little more connected to the world.
When people are around me, like when my grandma is visiting, and she said, "Oh, I almost killed this bug, Hannah, but you're here, so I didn't."
There you go. Yeah, I will think of you on that. So let's see here. Do you know this person here? Look down real quick.
I don't think so. No.
Oh, maybe. Okay. Well, I'm glad she's watching. She's with you. She's with you. She doesn't want to kill anything either. So, question number 2, then, real quickly. Let's talk about if you could sit and have an hour-long chat with anybody. You know, no strings attached, whether they're with us still or not with us still. If there's anybody you could sit and talk to just for an hour, unconditional, no strings attached, who would that person be?
Well, I have an answer, but I have another answer. So, like, the first people that come to mind are like the Dalai Lama and Nelson Mandela. I'd really like, especially Nelson Mandela, I'd like to ask him a lot of questions about why he did certain things he did, and if he would change anything he did, and what he would do right now in the heated environment we're in right now in the United States. But the other person, or I don't even know who it would be, but you might think I'm weird or crazy, but I would really love to sit down with someone who is in the inner circle of people who know about the inner alien knowledge that is not made public. We're not alone on this planet. I mean, we can't, in this universe, we can't be. And I find it very fascinating that maybe there's already been contact, and I would just love to give them a few drinks and get them talking.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's not an answer we've had so far. So I love that. That's awesome. Why not? Right? Yeah. There's got to be something else out there, right?
I mean, yeah. And there's people who I think know things that we don't know. And I want to talk to them.
Yeah, totally. That's awesome. I've not heard that answer, so that makes me happy. I love the answers when they're not just kind of what you already think they're going to be. I did not see that coming from you, but that's awesome. All right, the last one. This one kind of wraps it and kind of brings it back full circle. But let's get back to traveling. If you could travel anywhere right now, no COVID, let's get back to the way things were, or hopefully will be soon. Where would you go and why?
I would be resuming my travel plans. I would be on a sailboat to Colombia, and then doing Bolivia, and Peru.
I love it. And Bali at some point, right? So.
Well, everywhere at some point.
At some point.
I get to Australia in the next 5 years to reach that goal. So.
Cool. No, that's awesome. Hey, I wanted to kind of bring this up too. It looks like I'm gonna probably butcher her name, but Helene. She was talking about the relationship. She went through something similar to you, so I just wanted to make sure you saw that. And let me see. She put one more thing on here. Yeah. So, Oh, she was a med tech too. So anyway, it looks like she went through something similar. And I did want to kind of talk about this just quickly
Yeah.
because you brought this up in your TED Talk too. And I can't stress enough, those of you that are watching, please go and watch the TED Talk, because it's whatever you got out of this interview, which was amazing. The TED Talk's even better.
I also want to throw in the victim statement. You should read that too, because that gives you an idea of how it's just, I would read that. Police departments are using that as a training tool, and so are domestic violence resources.
No, it's amazing. And that's what I'm saying. Like, we've only kind of just touched a little bit on what you went through, but the documented stuff, everything that the TED Talk, the police statement, all that stuff, please read those. This is a serious topic, and that's one thing I wanted to kind of conclude on this. You brought this up in your TED Talk. We don't need to get too deep into it, but I also want to mention the fact that stereotype-wise, it's always thought of as it's just men to women, right? But it definitely happens towards men as well. I mean, you brought that up in your TED Talk too, and I just want to make sure that we're clear on that as well. Obviously more so with women, but it does happen with men. So women towards men. So
absolutely. And then I think it can be, there's an extra layer for men who are going through it because of our cultural perception about that it's against women, and that for it to be against a man, it's not as accepted or known. And so, and it's 1 in 7 men who go through it, and that's a lot of people, and it's more closeted. I mean, it's closeted in general for everyone. For a man, it can be even more so because of the stigmas of
totally.
Yeah,
we're supposed to be macho and not talk about stuff like that, but yeah, it definitely happens. So, well, listen, you are not only a role model and inspiration, you are a total badass, and I can't thank you enough for doing this. I hope that your message got out. This was just another avenue to get your message out, but please keep doing what you're doing. It's such an important discussion, whether it's adults or kids going off to college. I mean, these things are happening. It's not something that needs to be swept under the rug. I'm so glad that you're well, let me take that back. I'm so sorry that you went through what you went through. That said, I'm so glad that you've been brave enough to actually be a voice to this and doing in doing what you're doing. So I just want you to know, on behalf of myself and everybody watching and people that will watch this in the future, you truly are an inspiration. So just keep fighting the good fight. And I hope nothing like this ever happens to you again. I don't think it will, because you're too damn tough, right? You're a tough chick. So.
I know the signs. I'll be out of there.
Yeah, but that's good. I mean, but you're such an advocate now, and you can make this better. And I love, that's why I love having these, the people that I've had on the show. They're people that truly want to make a difference in the world, and you're doing that right now. So and having said that, if you ever are in San Francisco's airport on your way overseas, sitting in the international terminal, and your phone dies and you need a charger and you're too afraid to go talk to someone who might have a charger, go talk to them, because look at this, right? We're sitting here 5 years later. Truly, I just thought you had a charger, and I walked up and I said, "Hey, please, please, please," and here we are 5 years later. So, but look, you are amazing, and let's definitely keep in touch. And I applaud what you're doing right now. I feel for you for what you've been through, but you've come out on top and then some. So, thank you so much for doing this. Keep being a voice, because people need to hear your story.
Thank you, Ben. Maybe
no problem. Yeah, go ahead.
Hotline for domestic violence.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Yeah, is that do you know? I have it. I think I wrote this down, but yeah, there's another message there. But in terms of the hotline, do you know what it is right now? Because I can type that in real quick. Oh, it is on. I put it on. It's one of the links though. Okay, so in your bio, so people, if you go to Hannah's bio, and like I said, this will all be back up on BenThere.org if you missed it on the Facebook feed. Or the YouTube feed. Those continue to kind of replay. So, but that said, if you don't get to those today, BenThere.org, there it is right there. I can't really see it. There we go. Oh, wrong way. There we go. BenThere.org. But all these links will be on there. I'll just make sure they go right over there, and they'll be there permanently. So, but check it out. Check out the TED Talk. Check out her. Basically your words that kind of put this guy away. I hope you don't feel guilty about that, because you shouldn't. So good. But you're an amazing person, and just keep fighting the fight, and keep doing what you're doing. There's a lot of people. There's another one, just chiming in. So your story's huge. It needs to be told. Hannah, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, Ben, for having me. And
no worries. What's that?
And thank you everyone for watching too.
Absolutely. Well, stick around, Hannah. I'm going to sign off right now, but don't go anywhere, and you and I'll chat right after the broadcast. But those of you that are watching, this has been BenThere.org, episode 22, with our special guest, Hannah Petrillo. I don't want to say that wrong, right? So I got it right. So, all right. Well, you guys take care. We will be back next Sunday with an old high school idol of mine, Mr. Scott McCann. So those of you that are watching, thank you for watching. Please make sure you subscribe on the YouTube channel. That keeps things going. Facebook is awesome. Facebook is free. Don't get me wrong. But if you could all subscribe on the YouTube channel, that definitely helps this show out, because we want to keep doing this and get people like Hannah on, not just TCKs. This is a traveler show, so to speak, and a third culture kid show, so to speak. But every now and then we're gonna put people on that are making a difference in the world, and this has definitely been one of them. So Hannah, stick around. The rest of you, until next time, thank you. We'll talk to you guys later. Bye bye.